the liar knows what lie he told. You see what I'm saying? So even if I made it deceitful and I made you think that the answer is over here, but the answer is really over here, I'm still going to be looking over here. Me, the one that tricked, because I know this is the right answer. Black people have lost their identity, but our oppressors have not lost our identity. But our oppressors have not lost our identity. But our oppressors have not lost our identity.
So, a little over 1,000 years ago, as Jewish people scattered around the world had now emigrated in Europe and now were living in the Rhineland in Germany, they looked at the name Gomer in Genesis 10, and they connected Gomer with Germany, so they took on the identity of the name Ashkenaz. It has nothing to do with Ashkenaz in the Bible, which is a descendant of Japhet. It's just a name that was taken. Okay, it's that simple. Just like my last name Brown doesn't refer to the color of my skin or anything else. It was shortened from a Russian name when my grandfather came over at Ellis Island. The name got shortened to Brown. It's just a name. That's all it is. So the idea that Ashkenazi Jews are descended from Japhet is a myth, 100% false.
You can't see it, but it says up there that this is the 4th of March, 2022. So in 1914, there was a revolution in Russia. 1914. 3 years later, the Khazarians out of Ukraine, where am I at here? Out of the Ukraine, the Khazarian mafia out of the Ukraine took over the Russian Revolution through several of their agents, including Vladimir Lenin. Okay, so when that happened the revolution happened in 1914. For 3 years, they held the Tsar and his family captive. And we're in the process of rebuilding the Federation of Russia at that time. This is 1914. From 1914 to 1917, even in the midst of that revolution, even in the midst of the Russian Revolution, the very, very heart of it all going down, Russia had the most effective agriculture system on this planet. Russia fed most of Western Europe and a great deal of Africa and Asia. Russia was the breadbasket for the planet. It was the most efficient production system we've ever seen for food. It has never been equaled on a calorie in to calorie out basis, okay? And in 1917, the Khazarian mafia got really, really, really pissed, and they moved out of Ukraine. They moved out of Ukraine, and they went into Russia, and they called themselves Bolsheviks, and they took over the Russian Revolution, and they destroyed that food system, and all of the people, 2 million plus people on the outskirts, and 12 million people in the greater Khazarian area, Ukraine and so on, and Kazakhstan and all of this. 12 million people in there died from starvation. It was twice the claimed death rate for people killed by Hitler. And you don't ever hear anybody talking about it because it was the Khazarian mafia, the Ukrainians, taking over and doing their fish here that caused this. Here's something you need to know about the Khazarians, okay? The Khazarian Empire extended from this area here, went through, let me get a marker here, see if this will work. Okay, so this is the former abroad, that's not going to do it. Anyway, so we have here, there we go, better. We have a Khazarian Empire that at one point went over, there we go, into the northern part of India. And we know this, that in spite of the formalities that said that the old Khazarian Empire ended in this area here, we know it extended over as far as this boundary here, because there are persistent historical not myths, They do have some aspects of legend, but they're inculcated into our expressions in all of our languages. So even in Chinese, so in China, there is this, the cultural work for the Chinese is called The Journey to the West. Really, it's a cool book. Jackie Chan's made several movies about the central characters in that book. All Westerners should read it if you want to understand the Chinese mind. It doesn't aid you understanding the CCP and those people, but it does aid you in understanding the cultural milieu in which China has arisen to the modern state here. Okay, but even in Journey to the West, there are aspects to this little story here. The Chinese had this phrase, this expression, that you had to watch out for the name stealers.
So, a little over 1,000 years ago, as Jewish people scattered around the world had now emigrated in Europe and now were living in the Rhineland in Germany, they looked at the name Gomer in Genesis 10, and they connected Gomer with Germany, so they took on the identity of the name Ashkenaz. It has nothing to do with Ashkenaz in the Bible, which is a descendant of Japhet. It's just a name that was taken. Okay, it's that simple. Just like my last name Brown doesn't refer to the color of my skin or anything else. It was shortened from a Russian name when my grandfather came over at Ellis Island. The name got shortened to Brown. It's just a name. That's all it is. So the idea that Ashkenazi Jews are descended from Japhet is a myth, 100% false.
The Chinese had this phrase, this expression, that you had to watch out for the name stealers. We have that same expression arising from Europe in 800 AD. That was when it was written down in 800 AD. It was written down in Europe. Watch out for the name stealers. Don't have anything to do with them. All of this kind of stuff. You're just going to get into trouble. And the name stealers here that are being referenced, and the name stealers referenced in China that goes back even further than that 800 AD. Now, this was written down in 800 AD. They may have had it for 1,000 years before that as part of the heritage in the Oralinda, the Codex Oralinda. This is where I'm referencing it, right? But it's written down in other areas, in other literature. I think even Chaucer had a little bit of an allusion to it. But in any event, so it goes back some period of time. And these are the name stealers, okay? Because the Khazarians were this group. Now in China, they described it as if you go far enough west, you will run into these people that will invite you into their village as a traveler. They will feed you. You will have a nice drink. You have a great night. They put you in the best bed in the inn, and then they kill you. Okay? Then they kill you. They take all of your possessions and they steal your name. Now, while you're having dinner with them and they're getting you drunk and stuff and they're drugging you up, they were known to really use drugs and be black magic kind of people, right? A lot of black magic is associated with the ability to know how certain drugs will affect the mind, et cetera, and you can introduce them into food. So mostly a lot of magic per se is dealing with drug states for the mind. That aside, the Chinese had the saying, or had the understanding that if you went there, they would get your story. They would steal your name and your story. And so the Khazarians were known by the Chinese, and so, but it was known on both sides. So if you were over here and you were going to try and do business with the Chinese and you went through there, you might run into one of these groups of the Khazarians that would kill you after learning everything they could about you. They would steal your story. Then they would go to China, pretend to be you, make the deal, and then go back, and the deal never happened. You might run into one of these groups of the Khazarians that would kill you after learning everything they could about you. They would steal your story. Then they would go to China, pretend to be you, make the deal, and then go back, and the deal never happened. You might run into one of these groups of the Khazarians that would kill you after learning everything they could about you. They would steal your story. Then they would go to China, pretend to be you, make the deal, and then go back, and the deal never happened.
So, a little over 1,000 years ago, as Jewish people scattered around the world had now emigrated in Europe and now were living in the Rhineland in Germany, they looked at the name Gomer in Genesis 10, and they connected Gomer with Germany, So they took on the identity of the name Ashkenaz. It has nothing to do with Ashkenaz in the Bible, which is a descendant of Japhet. It's just a name that was taken. Okay, it's that simple. Just like my last name Brown doesn't refer to the color of my skin or anything else. It was shortened from a Russian name when my grandfather came over at Ellis Island. The name got shortened to Brown. It's just a name. That's all it is. So the idea that Ashkenazi Jews are descended from Japhet is a myth. 100% false.
After learning everything they could about you, they would steal your story, then they would go to China, pretend to be you, make the deal, and then go back, and the deal never happened. So they're both sides, really. That was the thing, right? These were truly evil people. Now, both sides of the trade equation understood that there were nasty people. And in the Codex Orlinda, they're described as being to the east, and the Chinese are describing them as being to the west. Aha! Anyway, so here we are in our current war, all right? And so in our Budo at the moment, we're discussing the active war that's ongoing, but it's not really a war. They're trying to make it a war in the United States, Britain, France, all these places that are controlled by the Khazarian mafia, right? Politically, because that's what they've done. They've stolen lots of names, and they've inculcated themselves all over the planet as a hidden control mechanism. Now, so, all right, so it gets really tricky, and you have to be careful about all of this, because you'll get not only lost in the weeds of all of it. The history is fascinating, but you have to be careful, because you'll fall into traps that have been set by the Khazarians. All right, so the Khazarians were a nomadic people that are descended from the Mongols that interbred with people and had a particular phenotype. Now, this particular phenotype, with this clan of the Khazarians, was in a real bind at one point, because they were trapped between the Byzantine Empire, which was also the Holy Roman Empire, and they were trapped between Turks in the rising Ottoman Turkey Empire. And they had a big problem. They couldn't go and deal with the Turks without fighting with the Holy Roman Empire. They couldn't deal with the Holy Roman Empire without fighting with the Turks, so they were squeezed. So they decided to claim that they were Jews. So they decided to claim that they were Jews. So they decided to claim that they were Jews.
I want to start off by stating that not a single Negro or African group was included in any of their testing. And when I say their testing, I am referring to the Israeli geneticists. They were very selective of the Eurasian, in other words, Eurasian people groups. They chose in an attempt to manipulate their expected outcome. Now, this is coming from an article titled Out of Khazaria, Evidence for Jewish Genome Lacking. This is coming from Aaron Elhig, an Ashkenazi Jewish geneticist. It reads, Aaron Elhig, a geneticist at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, thinks so. In a recently published study in Genome Biology Evolution, he is calling for a rewrite of commonly held assumptions about Jewish ancestry. Instead of being primarily the descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel, present-day Jewish populations are, finds Elhig, primarily the children of a Turkish people who lived in what now is Russia, north of Georgia, east of Ukraine. This civilization, the Khazars, converted from tribal religions to Judaism between the 7th and 9th centuries. The controversy cut into Elhig's works runs deep. Far past the lab bench, among some circles, his conclusions are bound to be unpopular. this is the first scientific paper to prove the Khazarian hypothesis and reject the Rhineland hypothesis, he says, and with it about 40 years of research. Although his findings will not be welcome in all circles, El-Haik's interest is more medical than political. All I want is to help my colleagues who are studying genetic disorder, he says. I hope this work will open up a new era in genetic studies where population stratification will be used more. Let's highlight another point of this article. Previous studies had, for example, combined the question of similarity among and between Jewish populations and the question of ancestry and relatedness to non-Jewish populations. El-Haik viewed these questions separately. Jewish communities are less homogeneous than is popularly thought, he says, with Jewish communities along the former Khazarian border showing the most heterogeneity. His second question centered on ancestry. When comparing Jewish communities to their non-Jewish neighbors, Caucasus or Levant, in other words, Middle Eastern populations, which is the closest to Jews. All Eurasian Jewish communities are closer to Caucasus populations, he writes, with Central European Jews closer to Italian non-Jews as the exception. Not one of the 8 evaluated Jewish populations were closer to Levant populations. Let me read that again. Not one of the 8 evaluated Jewish populations were closer to Levant populations. So I want to say this again. Not a single Negro or African group was included in any of their testing. And again, when I say their testing, I am referring to the Israeli geneticists. They were very selective of the Eurasian people groups they chose in an attempt to manipulate or control or dictate their expected output.
So they decided to claim that they were Jews, and so they couldn't be Christian, they couldn't be Muslim, but they wouldn't be dealt with by either of them. But the fact is that the clan here was not descended from Shem through Judah, right? I mean, it's not descended from that line biblically. But the fact is that the clan here was not descended from Shem through Judah, right? I mean, it's not descended from that line biblically. So these people at that time were 3%, 4% of a larger population in this region in here that was related to them by clan. So they were related to the Germans, the Poles, etc., because they'd been interbreeding for some period of time. This population in here decided that they were going to be Jewish, and within their understanding of Judaism, these people devised I guess we could say it was a scheme, a plot, a plan, etc., that spread a particular understanding through not only through Judaism, but through Christianity. It impacted Christianity because of what books were left out of the Bible, and because these people had control over King James and the people that were doing King James Bible, all of this kind of stuff. These people had control over a lot of that. So they have altered history, philosophy, viewpoints, all of these things in order to protect themselves, because they were the name stealers. They were going to steal names real big and go on and promulgate it to the point where we're here now. And so we're at war now, and we see Putin invading and starting a great World War III and everything by invading Ukraine. And that's a bunch of bullshit. It's a bunch of horseshit. Okay. I actually think now that I was inaccurate about Xi, and Xi will be participating in this as well. And I think that they're going to invade Taiwan. But what's going on is the eradication of the biolabs that are controlled by the Khazarian mafia. And by that, we also include Fauci, Biden, all of the fuckers in the United States who are also controlled by the Khazarian mafia. And we note that they all have huge bank accounts here. And look at how Zelensky, the head of Ukraine as a nation, has got this big, huge $34 million villa over here in Florida. So what's he doing? Planning on bugging out when it gets too cold there? Anyway, it's all interconnected, right? And so we're entering a period of war here. We're in a period of war now. We've been in a period of war all of my life, since 1963 in the assassination of Kennedy. And so we're in a period of war here that's developing, and as I had forecast months back, the language is bursting out. Now, our war language is going to be tainted by the other side because they're trying to gin it up as a nation-state war. Oh, evil Russians. And that's not it. Now we've got a case here that is really bizarre for the mainstream media, for the powers that be, because you've got a lot of people in the United States saying, yay, Putin, yay, Putin. And he's supposed to be the enemy according to our powers that be. And so this would be the equivalent of a bunch of people here in the United States after the bombing and everything had actually started saying, yay Hitler, right? In the 1940s. You just wouldn't see that happening. Here we're not coalescing the way that the powers that be want around this idea that Putin is the bad guy, that there's this World War III and so on, because so many of us know what the fuck is going on, and we're awake to the history and the problems that have been caused by these others here in Khazaria, and they've just got to go. Okay, so we've got to get rid of all of these things, all these people. Now, here's something to understand. In my opinion, Judaism had been taken over. Okay, they were the first group that was infiltrated by the bug, and for a lot of reasons having to do with the nature of a philosophical trait within the source code for Judaism, okay? And so this is where we get into this issue of source code. I'm of the opinion, because I bought a set here of the Talmud, and I've read as much of that thing as I could possibly plow through. And there are parts of it that are truly disgusting, okay? To see aspects of pedophilia ritualized, okay? Codified. So it is a source code at that stage. And I won't go into that at the moment, all right? But in any event, within the Talmud, you have to understand you cannot read it alone. It's 63 volumes. It's huge. It's commentary. A lot of people think of it as comedy, as it's thought of in many different contexts. But my way of thinking is that this is a meta layer of a code base, and that the Talmud has to be used to read the Jewish Bible, and that this is why in the Talmud they are so against. It was really funny because there were a lot of people in 325 AD that told Constantine, "Oh my God, you stupid emperor!" They didn't say it that way. Don't join the Jewish Old Covenant with the New Testament. Don't do it. They're not related, blah, 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 blah. They did it anyway, right? So the Bible is created as this combined work that basically includes the Torah with the New Testament. But it's really funny is that there were a lot of these people that were on the Jewish side saying, or on the Talmudic side, not the Jewish side, but on the Talmudic side saying, don't do it. But it was necessary that it be done, and Constantine, unlike Justinian later on, well, I won't go into that, but Constantine was maneuvered into doing this by Khazarians in his cabinet structure, because they had been infiltrating for years and years and years. As I say, for at least 6,000 years, they've been, the people that have been involved with all of this Khazarian stuff have been involved in this deep death cult that I frame as space alien influence, right? Anyway, though, so we have here the Talmud as a meta layer that is floating above, and you read the text of the Jewish Bible through the lens of the Talmud to understand this other massive layer of knowledge that can be gained from doing so. Now, this is not something most people are going to want to do for lots of reasons, because it gets you into some really seriously dark But it gets even worse than that, or it is even more magnified than that, because there's this thing called the Zohar, and it is part of the Jewish Kabbalist, okay? And this is from where we get the Cabal, right? But the Kabbalists are, they're like, so the Zohar has to be used as a lens to move and magnify and cite, as in terms of position, effectively, the Talmud, so that you can read the underlying stuff with an understanding.
What's your thoughts? Please be respectful with your comments. Also, please click the like, click the...
Let's click on some truth here. Let's go to Ezekiel 36. What is that, in 6? Right? Now remember...
Never pay for Wi-Fi.
Man, God damn it. every man. Wow. Every time. You hear me? Now, at the beginning of the video, they said, remember the Ashkenazi Khazars, they took over the land of Israel and spread throughout the entire world that they were the people, right? Ezekiel 36:2, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because the enemy hath said against you, Aha, even the ancient high places are ours in possession. Therefore prophesy and say, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because they have made you desolate and swallowed you up on every side, that you might be a possession unto the residue of the heathen, and ye are taken up in the lips of talkers, or in an infamy of the people. Right? Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 5. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, surely in the fire of my jealousy I have spoken against the residue of the heathen and against all Idumea. Now, the word Idumea is Greek in pronunciation. It's Greek for Edom. Now, Genesis chapter 36, verse 8 and 9 says, thus Esau dwelt at Mount Seir. Esau is Edom, right? In the jealousy have I spoken against the residue of the heathen and against all Idumea, a.k.a. Edom, the Caucasians, the Ashkenazi Jews that call themselves Jews and are not but do lie, okay? Like it says in Revelation chapter 3 and 9, right? Which have appointed my land into their possession with all the joy of their heart, with despiteful minds to cast it out for prey. Now, you heard the man just tell you that they cast it out for prey. Okay, cast it out for prey. Give you a drink, give you food, give you the best places to stay, the best, most comfortable bed to sleep in. Then they kill you, okay? Take your identification, take your name, take your story, and then go barter with other nations of people in your name and accumulate as much as they could. And then when the other person that you made, that they made this barter with using your name, they can deny it. Plausible deniability. That's where plausible deniability comes from. So anyway, I just thought I'd try to throw that off in there. These goddamn Edomites, boy, they're finished. You hear me? Anyway, all praises to the Most High, Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, HaMashiach. Shalom.